on today's StoryBeat.
I learned a great deal from Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera. I learned from them that cartoons can be as visually amazing as a Bob Clampett cartoon, but they also can be verbally clever, like the best of the Yogis and the Hucks. I really, ultimately, when I was writing animation scripts, I wanted the dialogue to flow almost like, not like poetry, but like music. I ultimately learned that that's how I wanted to make the cartoons.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Tom Ruegger, is the 14-time Emmy Award-winning producer and creative force behind many of the most popular and successful animated TV series of all time. Tom began his career at Hanna-Barbera Productions, working on such familiar cartoon series as Scooby-Doo, the new Flintstones, Casper, and Godzilla. Later, as a story editor and producer, he worked on shows like Pound Puppies and Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. Tom created and produced A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, the first Scooby-Doo series to be nominated for an Emmy. After honing his writing skills working at Filmation Studios on TV series like Blackstar and Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, Tom would subsequently join Warner Brothers Animation, where he went on to head up production on Tiny Toon Adventures, beginning a decade-long, wildly successful creative collaboration with Steven Spielberg, spanning 5 hit series resulting in over 30 Emmy Awards in numerous categories. In 1993, in collaboration with Mr. Spielberg, Tom created a cast of breakout characters for Animaniacs, the multi-award-winning Hellzapoppin'-style cartoon show starring the zany siblings Yakko, Wacko, and Dot Warner. Tom served as the show's senior producer, story editor, writer, and lyricist. Tom was chief creative executive at Warner Brothers Animation during its second golden age. Along with Gene McCurdy, Tom executive produced Tasmania and Batman, the animated series. Other acclaimed shows Tom has created and or produced include Pinky and the Brain, Freakazoid, Histeria, Road Rovers, and the feature film Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Tom also co-wrote the pilot and served as a script editor of the Emmy Award-winning animated series Tutenstein. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply honored to have the extraordinarily talented, highly influential animator, writer, and producer, Tom Ruegger, join me today. Tom, welcome to StoryBeat.
Thanks, Steve. Good night, everybody. It's been great. Talk to you later.
Thank you for joining us. Yes, indeed.
I can't top the intros. Very nice. And I really...
It sounds like you may have done a few things.
Well, yeah, I forgot Tutenstein. Wow, that was with Porchlight. Yeah.
Indeed. So let's go back in time just a little bit. How old were you when you first started paying attention to moving images and storytelling and animation?
I was probably, it would be television. I was 4 or 5. I was 5 years old when Huckleberry Hound show went on the air. And I would sit in front of the TV. Actually, I would lay down on the floor, and I had like a drawing pad in front of me with crayons. And as I would watch, I would draw whatever I wanted. I mean, I didn't always do this. Sometimes I was just riveted watching Huck and Yogi and the Mises and Mr. Jinx. But I did draw, and my parents noticed that I was drawing, that I wasn't tracing drawings of Huckleberry Hound. I was drawing, Huckleberry Hound.
Wow.
So they thought, oh, well, he's got something going on here. So they gave me more paper, and I did the same with the Yogi Bear show, and I'd watch the Disney on Sunday night. So I loved cartoons very much. I loved Bugs Bunny. I grew up in New Jersey, New York area, and every day in the afternoons, different hosts. Chuck McCann, Sandy Becker would have Warner Brother cartoons or any kind of cartoon. I would watch it. So I love cartoons. The Flintstones came on. They were huge. I enjoyed drawing Fred because the Hanna-Barbera cartoons were fun to draw because Bugs was hard to draw. Mickey and Donald Duck, they were much tougher, but the Hanna-Barbera lines were a little simpler, and the shapes were a little
Simpler.
more. Yes, so I like them a lot.
Sure. So you started out toward Hollywood to be an animator. Is that correct?
I did. That's correct. After college, I had an animated film, and I came out here to get a job.
But you didn't wind up being an animator, but working in animation mostly as a writer and producer. Have I got that right?
Well, I started as an assistant animator at Hanna-Barbera many, many years ago. I started there, and I was animating. The first day, I was assistant animating Godzilla and Janet of the Jungle footage, and just trying to keep a job. I had been offered a job, but it was a trial period, so I had to survive the first month. So I was taking my work home every day. And it was all about footage. How much footage could you churn out? And what we needed to be doing is following the roughs of the animators. And we had great animators there. We had, Rudy Cataldi and Bolis Jones and fabulous guys who had worked on Betty Boop and Donald Duck. They'd worked on stuff from the 30s and 40s. And then they were at Hanna-Barbera handing out the stuff to kids like me who, we barely knew what we were doing. And each scene would have a little chart of where to put the in-betweens. And you'd get stuff from like Maury Redden, who was one of the animators, and it was just like, it looked like a bunch of scribbles. It's like, what am I looking at? I've got to draw Fred and Barney running through here. I couldn't even find the lines. And so we had to clean it up, put it on the model, and then move it. And quite honestly, I was barely capable of doing that. I was not the greatest of the artists that were there.
Did you have animation training in college?
I had made an animated film in college. To say that it was training, I was doing it myself. A guy named Jack Zander gave me a few tips. He was doing commercials in New York, and I did go and visit him a couple times. But my professor in college was a fellow named Maury Raff, who was one of the writers on Song of the South, and he was an uncredited writer on Cinderella. So he had a Disney experience. But I made this animated film in college, and it was really just a tremendous amount of work. It ruined my life for a couple of years because it's so much work. And
but did you know at that time that you were already pretty decent with story? Was that something that was part of your makeup at the time?
No, I didn't think that I was a story guy. In college, to avoid having to read books at we had to read so much in college. It was just almost too much for me. And I was an English major in college. And so to survive and to pass tests, to pass essays, we had to write a lot of essays and final, big essays at the end of a term and your senior thesis. So what I found myself doing, rather than accomplishing all the reading, my papers would be literally fiction. I would write stories rather than these long essays. And I don't know why these professors permitted it, but I think they enjoyed my writing. I know I did this whole thing about Paradise Lost, Milton. And for the final paper of that class, I wrote Milton coming back to Hollywood to experience the filming of Paradise Lost. And of course, he's blind, so he has to just listen to it. But I remember I wrote a song for a sequence of that called Purgatory, Here We Come, Land of Hate and Devil's Glum, where fires will spire into the night, where boulders will smolder sizzling bright. God in his cruel politics sends us to the river Styx. Flames will be our crucifix, oh purgatory, here we come. So I So I passed the class, and that song, to prove that nothing is ever wasted, I used that in Animaniacs like 30 years later. So no waste. No.
That's amazing. That really is. And did you have it written down somewhere? Or did you remember it?
I remember that one. I remember that one. And there's one thing I wrote in high school. I was in a class, and it was about Russian literature, and I used that on Rovers, which was a cartoon show I made again 30 years later. But that was Russian names are kind of a game. There's a first and a last and middle name. Giving the first name is the mama's chore, like Boris, Alexander, or Fyodor. Last name comes from the family, like Pushkin, Bazarov, or Porfiry. But with the middle name, here comes the fun. The papa gives his first name to the son. He adds an ovich or a yivich to the end. Here's an example so you'll comprehend. The papa's name is son of. Now here's the switch. The kid's middle name is the son of a bitch. And so we only aired that one once because we got letters about son of a bitch.
I bet you did. Couldn't you have bleeped it out?
Yeah, we should. So anyway, I knew I liked comedy. Comedy was really whether you say, oh, did you know you could do story? I was very much into comedy. In high school, for final projects, some friends and I would always do little creative skits. Rather than the papers, we would do our own radio version of The Fall of the House of Usher. We did a whole piece on American literature. We did a version of The Tonight Show, and we actually filmed it on Super 8. It was just a tremendous amount of work. So I always like to do sort of the non-serious writing versions of essays.
You were doing parodies way back when. You were doing it way before you knew you would ever have a career, right?
That's absolutely true. And a friend of mine, Alan Vanook, we'd go over to Alan Vanook's house and do, I remember we did Devil and Daniel Webster at his house. And his dad, he was a blind musician. He could play the piano like nobody business. He no longer could see. He would just score as we're doing this dialogue. He would put these piano scores behind it. It was just fantastic. We'd tape record the whole thing. And those were so much fun because we had a script, but then we were also goofing around. So there was some improv. It was fabulous.
Well, so you just said something that I think is really key to having a career like yours, which is that you had fun growing up with this kind of work. And I have to imagine, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that your career was a lot of fun. You had a lot of fun.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's absolutely, I absolutely blessed and so fortunate to have a career that really, and then as I became sort of more like a supervisor, it was just the most entertaining career because I was surrounded by some of the funniest people on earth. And I mean, I don't know if my job was to laugh, but in my job, I laughed a great deal.
I bet.
I mean, recording sessions were absolutely hilarious. And, you know.
Well, you were working with some of the greatest voice talents ever.
Absolutely. I mean, from Frank Welker to Rob Paulson, Tress MacNeille.
Mo LaMarche and Rob Paulson. Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And just brilliant. Billy West, the voices that Frank and all those guys could do. I mean, that group could record almost anything. I mean, whether it's serious or comic. I mean, the impressions that they do, it's like they do dueling Shatners and they do who does the best Woody Allen. I don't know which one does the best. And of course, Tress MacNeille can imitate almost anyone and anywhere. So they are so entertaining. And in between the dialogue lines, they're cracking wise too. So there was very, very much fun.
Yeah, brilliant people. And when you're a writer, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know well, when you're a writer of animation and you go into the studio, you're not sure what's going to come out from the page. And they always, at least in my case, they always plussed what was on the page. It never got worse. It always got better.
No, they found things that we didn't know were there. And that's how brilliant these guys were. I don't know if kids listen to your show, and you could cut this part out, but there was a moment in one of the Animaniacs shows that it wasn't going to be a controversy. It wasn't going to even be that funny, but Tress MacNeille said something that just made it into something that's now sort of hazardous to your health. But we had a gag with Yakko dressed as Hercule Poirot, and he tells Dot and Wacko to look for clues. Look for fingerprints, see if there are any fingerprints. And a few moments later, Dot says, I found prints. And you cut to Dot, and she is in her arms holding the artist formerly known as Prince, the famous singer. and Yakko says, no, fingerprints. And the script says Dot just throws him out the portal. He throws Prince out the portal. And that's the end of the gag. But Tress MacNeille, who has just arrived at this line in the script, she had not rehearsed this. She got to that point and she realized that Yakko said fingerprints, and she said, "Oh, I don't think so." And that line, that's the line that wasn't in the script that now makes it kind of worse. Oh, I don't think so. Like, she knows that what Yakko's saying is horrible. And so somehow we left that in, and it's just, to this day, it's the most horrendous line in the series.
But it's still there, which I love.
It is still there.
I assume it got past BS&P, got past broadcast standards.
Right, they're watching it. They're busy. They're saying, fingerprints. I found prints. No, fingerprints. Oh, I don't think so. They're probably busy with something else, and they hear that now. It doesn't mean anything to them, and it absolutely went through. And we weren't trying to pull anything, really. I don't think I really got it until it was on the air. So
it's such a double entendre, but it doesn't. It's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I love.
Yeah.
All right. So when you started at Hanna-Barbera and you started at Filmation. What did you learn in those early days that held you in good stead for the rest of your career? Because that had to be your formative years. What did you learn from those folks?
I learned a great deal from Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bill Hanna, he was working there, and he was not a kid. He was in his late 60s or early 70s. He was working there from like 8 a.m. to like 9 p.m. I mean, this guy worked. He worked. And he had this book or, this sort of like clipboard that he carried around. He knew everything that was going on at that studio. He had been making cartoons since like 1932. And now it's literally 50 years later, and he is on the job making cartoons. Now, did he love cartoons? The guy loved cartoons. The guy loved the process. The guy cared.
Yeah.
He had made some of the greatest cartoons ever with Tom and Jerry, but then he and Joe, of course, were the pioneers of limited animation for television. You look at the Huck shows, the Yogi shows, they look very primitive, but they still read beautifully. And the animation is so simple, and they're popping from pose to pose, but it really still works. And I learned from them that the voice work by Dawes Butler and Don Messick and June Foray and others.
And Mel Blanc.
Right. It's like radio come to life with this limited animation. And they used all the great radio actors of the earlier era. And so I learned that, cartoons can be as visually amazing as a Bob Clampett cartoon, but they also can be verbally clever, like the best of the Yogis and the Hucks. So I definitely learned that dialogue matters. And I think when I finally started writing cartoons, I was very mindful that, I want something funny visually going on, but the dialogue is important too. And I really, ultimately, when I was writing animation scripts, and I knew kind of what was going on, and I knew what I was going to see, I wrote the dialogue almost entirely for the entire script first. Nothing else, because I in my head, I knew what I was going to put in there, because I wanted the dialogue to flow almost like, not like poetry, but like music. It needs to sound, in my head, I want it to sound a certain way, and I want it to build. So I ultimately learned that that's how I wanted to make the cartoons.
I often think of Rocky and Bullwinkle as being, it was not a terribly well, beautifully drawn animated show, but it was absolutely brilliant verbally. And that's what made that show work. That's what you're talking about.
Well, now those shows, of course, benefited immensely from the narration of Bill Conrad. The Rocky show had Bill Conrad really carrying almost the entire load. I mean, yeah, Boris Badenov would come in, Rocky and Bullwinkle would have an exchange, but boy, did Bill Conrad as the narrator carry stuff. And the shows that I ultimately was involved with didn't have that narrator, so our characters had to carry it.
Hmm. What do you think is more difficult, writing comedy well or action?
Well, for me, pure action doesn't really interest me as a creative outlet. Comedy is what I really love and care about, and aspire to. Even when I'm writing like a Batman, if one of my scripts goes out, if you see a Batman that I've written, if there's no comedy in it, I promise you, it was in the script, but it got cut out by the story editor because I don't even like the dramas not to have light moments. And certainly in the cartoons that I love and care about, Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, Tiny Toons, I'm most proud of the ones that make people laugh.
What is it that you do then to develop your comedy chops? Is there anything that you do? Is it something you study, somebody you talk to, or is it just so innate and natural that it just comes out of you? Or is there some process you go through?
Well, I think I was fortunate to grow up in a household where comedy was appreciated. When I was a kid, the Stooges were important. We would watch Ed Sullivan on Sunday nights, which was a variety show years and years ago. And the highlight of those shows would be the comedian would come out, whether it's Henny Youngman or Jonathan Winters or Nichols and May. I mean, those were what we waited for. Those were the moments that we loved. Jackie Vernon. I mean, Art Matrano.
Jackie Mason.
Yeah, I absolutely love those. And then I would even steal their punchlines and put them in little comic strips that I would draw. Jonathan Winters, I think, was the one that my dad particularly loved because he was just so zany.
Well, by the time you got to Animaniacs, you were really riffing off of the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges. I mean, that
Definitely
was obvious.
By then we had all had Jonathan Winters in on Tiny Toons too, and Jonathan Winters, he was very much a presence in Toluca Lake, where we would go have lunch at there was a ham, honey baked ham. We'd go sit there and get our sandwiches. Jonathan Winters would come walking down the block. This is true. He would come in the honey baked ham every day and go table to table, and almost like he was the host, and he wasn't. He was just, and he would basically give you about 5 minutes at each table. He would pick up the spoons, or he would talk about your shirt. And I had a shirt like that. And so anyway, that was to me just the most amazing thing about working in this town. That then the next day, Jonathan would be in the booth, playing Hampton Pig's grandfather. I mean, it was just wonderful, or actually his father. So I think I veered off the answer to the question, but I know that comedy was really everything.
Clearly, it's where your main focus has been, and all your truly great successes are all comedies. Was he allowed to improvise in the studio?
Well, it was impossible for him not to. He'd sit at the mic, and he would tell you about things that were going on in his life, or things that he recalled from his past that he wanted to share with you that day. And eventually you would say, could you read line 17 now? And he'd go, oh, yeah. And he would read it, and then he would go on to something else. So you couldn't have the whole cast in there with Jonathan because you'd never get it done. It would never get done.
Were you able to incorporate what he said?
At times we would. I mean, if it was pertinent to the show, or certainly his inflections, his weird laughter, or weird, here's where you fall down on your head, Jonathan, he would, oh, my head is, he would do stuff that would be pertinent.
Tell the listeners who Howie Morris was.
Oh, this could be too long a story. Howie Morris was one of the original great members of the cast of something called Your Show of Shows, which was the Sid Caesar show in the 50s. And it was Imogene Coca, Carl Reiner, Howie Morris, and of course Sid Caesar. And Howie was on the Andy Griffith Show, and he did just a tremendous number of voices for Hanna-Barbera. And he and Joe Barbera had a breakup. They were really working well together, but they ultimately had an argument about, I don't know what it was, but so he came in and he did Dinky Dalton. We were doing, John Luden and I had written something called The Good, the Bad, the Huckleberry. It was a long form. It was like tremendously long. It seemed like it never ended. It was like a 2-hour block in prime time, which is too long. But Howie Morris came in and Joe Barbera specifically told us, now, Tom, I want you to, when you're recording that, Dinky Dalton's laugh is this. Ha, 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 ha. That's his laugh. It's always been his laugh. Get Howard to do that laugh. Okay. So, of course, Gordon Hunt's the director, and Gordon's very busy, so I haven't even told Gordon about it. And so we record the whole show, and Gordon, I said, Gordon, Joe Barbera wants a specific, I'll tell Howie what he wants. Howie we want, and Howie's just, he's doing Dinky Dalton. And Joe wants you to do Dinky Dalton's laugh, ha, 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 ha. And Howie said, well, then get Joe Barbera to come in here and do it, because that's the laugh I'm doing that. And oh golly, he was just brutal.
So, all right, let's talk for a moment about developing series, which is a little different than developing a single episode. When you get set to, either somebody says, hey, we're interested in the development of a new series, or something occurs to you to develop as a new series, where do you begin? Usually with characters, the location, where do you begin?
Yeah, I'd say it's often we need a show who has some show ideas. So I know for Road Rovers, I got a bunch of people together and I said, I want to do a dog show. And we just started drawing dogs, lots of dogs, different dogs in different situations. And ultimately, we put some dogs in some superhero suits, and that evolved. Now, Tiny Toons, for instance, that was the development of that was Steven and Warner Brothers wanted to do, they wanted to take Bugs and Daffy and do sort of junior versions of them. So that's where I was brought in to develop sort of kid versions. So that had a great deal of obvious backstory to it. In other words, you kind of knew what that was going to be. Now, Animaniacs was completely, that was where freedom reigned, because after the success of Tiny Toons, Steven was now relaxed. He wasn't worried that we were going to ruin his career. Tiny Toons was a hit. So he basically said to me, Tom, what do you want to do next? And I wanted to do new characters, brand new characters. And I already had some duck characters in mind, which were from my college years, the film I had made. And I had 3 of them. And pretty soon I had a Pinky and the Brain idea, because that was based on 2 guys in the next office. I wanted to do a variety show of a whole bunch of new cartoon characters, new teams of comedy. So Pinky and the Brain were based on Tom Minton and Eddie Fitzgerald, who were in the next office, who Tom was a very low talker. And I think you know Tom Minton. And Eddie Fitzgerald was a very loud, boisterous, goofy guy. And Eddie would literally, when everything, Tom would say something very low. And what do you think about that? And that's fantastic, Tom. Narf. He said the word narf in real life, which, so I took for that. See, this shows get developed every which way. But so Bruce Timm, this great artist producer, had made caricatures of everybody in the studio. So I took Bruce Timm's caricature of Tom Minton and Bruce Timm's caricature of Eddie Fitzgerald. I put big mouse ears on them. I put little red noses on them, and I had the designs for Pinky and the Brain.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And they were always sort of in there, and I was sort of, it's like they're plotting. It's like they're plotting to take over the world. And so that's the evolution of that. And then to sell it to Steven, I wrote a little jingle. And I went, because I always like to write the little jingle. So on a Saturday morning with Gene McCurdy and Sherry Stoner, we went to Steven Spielberg's house and we pitched them Yakko, Wacko, and Dot and Minnie, but we pitched them all these different segments. And so for Pinky and the Brain, I held up their drawings and I said, the same lyrics that are in the main title, but I didn't have the tune yet. So I sang it to Singing in the Rain. They're Pinky and the Brain, yes, Pinky and the Brain. One is a genius, the other's insane. They're laboratory mice, their genes have been spliced. They're Dinky, they're Pinky and the Brain. And Spielberg's looking at me and he goes, sold.
Wow.
So that was not a tough sell.
Wow. That must have been a landmark moment for you, yeah?
It was great. So he had already eliminated Minnie and Buttons, who are members of the Animaniacs cast. He said, we have too many, we have Rita and Runt, we have Pinky and the Brain, we have the Warner, we don't need another duo like Mindy and Buttons. So at that point, Steven's wife and a whole passel of their kids come into the room, and one of the kids, a toddler, like 2 years old, when toddling up, we have all these stand-ups of all the different characters, and he goes up to Mindy, of Mindy and Buttons, who's been tossed. He goes, I like her! And Steven looks at us and says, Mindy and Buttons are back in the show. So that's how Mindy and Buttons got in.
The idea of you pitching a cartoon show to Steven Spielberg all by itself is kind of awesome, let alone to get it sold on just one quick pitch.
And it was on a Saturday morning at his house eating milk and cookies. I swear to you.
Oh,
that's what we were doing there. Bizarre.
That's a phenomenal story.
Fun.
That is a lot of fun. All right, so now you have sold Pinky and the Brain or Animaniacs or whatever you've sold to Spielberg, the studio, whoever. Where's your next step? Is it the development of those characters?
And you realize, of course, because Steven endorses it, Gene McCurdy then just calls up Margaret Lesh over at Fox and says, so Steven wants to do this thing Ruegger's got called Animaniacs. You in? We're in. It was that simple. And Warner Brothers fortunately had a whole bunch of money thanks to the success of the Batman feature, so they could afford to finance these things. And Steven insisted, it needed to be the full orchestra, so we were recording the music at the Eastwood stage there at Warner Brothers. So the next thing, we would spend with Sherry Stoner and Paul Rugg and John McCann, Peter Hastings, Deanna Oliver, just a whole bunch of really talented, funny people, and also the artists like Rich Ahrens and his entire crew. We would develop all these characters. Now, we'd already done drawing development because when we pitched it to Steven, we had these beautiful drawings of all the characters. But now we had to put them to work, put the characters to work, have the characters. We had written a Bible for all the characters that, we basically came up with catchphrases and things that they do. And I would say maybe 50%, not nearly 100% of the stuff in the Bible got into the series. But, when something starts working that's in the Bible that you're using and you're putting it in and, oh yeah, that works, some of the other stuff just gets dropped.
Explain for the listeners who don't know, what is a Bible and how important is it?
In this case, for the writers, it proved to be very important. The Bible is hopefully not terribly long document that explains what the premise of the show is, explains the personality of each character, what they like, what they do, how they behave and perform, like what's their funniest thing that they do, physically, what do they do, it's sort of like a full biography of the character, like what's their flaw, what's their weakness, what do they live for. And for the Warners, their job in the show, in real life, they are just trying to have a good time, and invariably they run into kind of stuffed shirts, pompous people who are full of themselves that sort of get in the way. and the Warners, deflate those blustery people. And that was sort of the premise of the Warners. They're just out, they're kids out to have a good time. Of course, Pinky and the Brain's premise was that each night they would make a new effort to conquer the world. And he had these elaborate plans each time, and they're absurd plans that couldn't work and didn't work. But they would leave their Acme Lab cage and try out a new plan every night. Mindy and Buttons was based on this little girl that lived down the street from our studio. Deanna Oliver would walk to the studio every day, and there was a little girl who was on a harness, like a dog would be on a harness, not strapped to a tree, but she was on a leash that was hooked to a tree. And
My goodness.
Deanna would walk by, and the little girl would go, "Hi, lady. Hi, lady." And Deanna would go, "Hi." And that's where Mindy came from. And so we had Mindy's mother, you'd see her now and then, and said, "Mindy, hi, lady." She said, "No, call me Mom. I'm your mother." Yeah, okay, lady. So anyway, there was a dog named Buttons in the yard, and Mindy would get out of the harness and go off like Sweet Pea would in an old Popeye cartoon and walk on a construction site. And Buttons, the dog, like Lassie, would save Timmy in the old Lassie show. Buttons would save Mindy. Rita and Runt were two strays, cat and dog, who were looking for a home, and those were centered around the voice of Rita, Bernadette Peters, who would sing a beautiful sort of Broadway song in each episode. But the Warners had nemesis on the lot. They had the guard and the psychiatrist. And anyway, lots of different elements. The center of it was the Warners lived in a water tower on the Warners lot, and they would escape every day. And that's it. That was the show.
So you drew a huge amount of character work from various real life things. Is that correct?
Safe to say. Yeah, I mean, I would say our show had definite, there needed to be a reality to the characters for them to play. They can't just be complete fantasy characters. So it was set in our world. Even though characters, we could have a segment go back a century, but we always came back to the Warner lot. But we would do, the Warners would meet Einstein. The Warners would meet Michelangelo. Pinky and the Brain would be there at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So we could go anywhere. But Animaniacs, as a cast, were all these zany characters in the main tally. You see them marching along on the stage. So it's like they all work on the same show. There's a real breaking of the fourth wall, I'd say, that's evident in many of the segments.
Mm-hmm.
That we touch base with the audience saying, yeah, I know you're watching a cartoon show. We know we're in this show, and we like that.
Well, it's again, and let me go back a step. It feels very much like the way the Marx Brothers did it, where they're in a real situation that they've made up, but everything is breaking the fourth wall and craziness and over the top stuff, and then verbal language at the same time. That's what this felt like to me, which I think is because I grew up with those guys and I still love them, and so that's what makes that show, your show, great, is that it felt like a cartoon version of that.
Without a doubt. Prior to writing our first scripts, we spent a couple of days watching all of the Marx Brothers. We all got together and we watched all of them. We also watched a movie, Hell's a Poppin', by Olson and Johnson. The first 20 minutes of it is maybe the funniest 20 minutes you can find. And it takes place in hell. And there's dancing and singing. It's just fantastic. And then the remaining 60 minutes of the movies, you can just throw it away. But just, and you can find in our show, in Animaniacs, there'll be references to Hell's a Poppin', just like lines that we borrow. But Marx Brothers, huge influence, especially Yakko. Yakko's very much, the very first Yakko recordings, Yakko almost is doing an impression of Groucho. And Rob Paulson smartly develop the character's voice so that became less and more Rob. So by going with the Marx Brothers as sort of your home base, where you're starting from, can you imagine a better place to start for comedy? There's no better place.
That's as good as it gets. Where did the idea of basically riffing on Orson Welles for Brain come from?
This is truly a serendipitous thing. When we went in to audition, to do auditions for the Brain, we literally did not know. We had no idea what the Brain's voice would be. We didn't know. By the way, we didn't know what Wacko's voice would be. That Jess Harnell came in and started doing Beatles. We said, "Oh my gosh, that's really interesting." So we're doing auditions for Pinky and the Brain. Maurice LaMarche comes in. Now, Maurice LaMarche, we've been working with him for years on all sorts of different shows, including Tiny Toons, where he was Dizzy Dumb. Now, Maurice LaMarche has memorized in his life, because he wants to do this, because he likes it. He has memorized this series of recordings about Orson Welles doing commercials for a producer at radio commercials about peas.
Peas.
Peas grow there. Don't you want to get off the field because the snow? Peas grow there. What are you doing, people? So it's Orson Welles doing these commercials, and he's really having problems with the engineers. There's a gonk. What's a gonk? I can't do this. I take direction from one person, but from two, I just won't have it. So Orson Welles is really going off during this commercial. So Maurice LaMarche, no matter what show he's recording, no matter what cartoon character he's playing, when he comes into a studio and gets behind the mic, his warm-up exercise had been for years, and continued to be at that point, him doing Orson Welles' peas commercial. And this is Groton's fish sticks. And so as normal, he was just there and he was just warming up. He was doing, you ask for two, he's doing his Orson Welles stuff, and he's got the copy in front of him. And we just said, Maurice, just what you're doing right there, just start reading the copy, same voice. And that's how Orson Welles, Maurice LaMarche's Orson Welles voice became the Brain.
Well, that's just one of the brilliant finds of all time.
It really worked, didn't it? Yeah, it's just like, because Orson was such a character, and Maurice loves doing it so much.
Well, there's a specific lilt to that voice and a way that he delivers, and it's very specific. And it's so good in that part. And then counterpointed by Rob Paulsen doing Pinky as just this wacko guy. It's just perfect.
Fabulous. And here's something else about Rob. Rob doing Yakko. We had all sorts of people coming in for auditions for Animaniacs. And so, but we really wanted Rob, and we knew there were going to be some songs. We knew Rob really was a great singer. And we sent 10 auditions to Steven for him to, maybe he would like one of those 10. But we numbered them. We didn't say this is this actor, this is that actor. We just numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we put Rob Paulsen auditions like at number 2, number 4, number 7, and number 10. So he was stacked. It was Rob Paulsen stacked, and he picked the Rob Paulsen voice, which is we're very grateful.
Well, you should be.
I can't imagine the show without him.
Yeah. Rob Paulsen did a ton of stuff that I wrote in my time writing animation. So I was always grateful for his performances. There was never a false note in any of his performances.
Yes, he always brought so much more to it. Yeah. He goes around the country now with Randy Rogel doing Animaniacs in concert, and he sings, the United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, this really long song, the countries of the world, every country of the world. And when we recorded that, he showed up, and you send the copy and the guide track to the actors, a couple of days before. And sometimes they've listened to it, sometimes they have. Rob came in and had it memorized already.
Wow.
He is that good. And he also knew this song, this is going to make it. And he was right. It really kind of made the show. That first week it appeared, and it was being played in boardrooms around the country after. Honest to God, it was just like hot. Yeah.
Yeah, and his performance in it is memorable, and that's why it works.
Oh, yeah. I don't know of anyone that can really do it.
And he has to wrap his tongue around all those words, and and you can understand every word, which is a miracle by itself.
And it speeds up, which is brutal. You know, he's got da-da, and then da-da-da-da-da, and by the end, oh my gosh.
So what is your take on, sort of off the comedy topic for a moment, onto something somewhat serious, which is pitching? I would love to hear from you. You've taken thousands of pitches and you've given hundreds, if not thousands, of pitches. What is your advice for those that are trying to sell something as to the best way to think about pitching and to pitch stories?
Well, this is, of course, one of the great mysteries of life, isn't it? The whole pitch thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've written a little thing called like Tom Ruegger's Pitch Guide, you know, and I have to pull it out because I haven't looked at it lately. Just so you know, to take advice from me on this is potentially a mistake, because, you know, while I've had some wonderful, successful pitches, I had one at Warner Brothers where, you know, I walk in, I pitch something. This is, you know, since I left Warner Brothers, and the guy's sitting there and he says, "We're making this show." And it was like, wow, you know, that's the kind of thing you want to hear in a pitch. They didn't make the show, by the way, but, you know, you can't win them all.
Right.
But just so you know, I've done pitches where to whom I'm pitching, I think it was a Cartoon Network, and they called my agent, and they literally said, "That is the worst pitch we have ever heard. Don't ever send him over here again." So, you know, you can't win them all. Spike and Tony, who do a lot of the stuff at Warner Brothers now on Duck Dodgers and things, that they had the same experience where they went and pitched something and they said, you know, worst pitch ever. And the people there were told, well, these guys are really talented. They can do it. Oh, okay. So that's one thing about the pitch. Make sure you are pre-sold. Make sure that the people sitting there know good things about you. If there are bad things about you, you don't want them to know that. They don't tell them that. But if whoever's sending you in can prime them with how wonderful and talented and great you are, to have the receivers of the pitch be beholden or feel positive about you, really good. The more you know in a pitch, the more you know about the person to whom you are pitching, the better. Even if, you know, maybe you and a friend went to the same school or something, or, you know, just, or you worked at the same company, maybe know some of the same people, anything that endears you a little bit to this person.
So you need an edge, a leg up of some kind. Yeah.
Well, that would be great if you can get it. I mean, they're getting so many, you know, so many pitches I mean, often when you're pitching, it's like their pitch day and you're wedged in there somewhere on their day where they're getting a bunch of pitches. So to stand out nowadays is very tricky, because you can imagine they probably heard every sort of pitch. I mean, there was a point, this is probably 5 years ago, where I know that at Disney, they were getting musical instruments that have come to life and pitch like every day for like months. It was in the zeitgeist, and I don't think they ever did anything with it. But I think you want to be, you know, you want your 1 minute pitch, you want your 3 minute pitch, you want your 5 minute pitch, because the 1 minute pitch, it needs to go into the next, because they can cut you off. Boom, we have a show just like that. We're not going to take the pitch anymore. You know what I mean? You can get cut off real quick. So you do want to have, when you go in for a pitch, I think you want to have 3 things that you're really comfortable pitching. Also, practice the daylights out of the pitch before going in. Do not wing it. I can't say that enough. Don't wing it. Because I remember I went on into a pitch with Rob Schneider, once, who was a Saturday Night Live comedian, and he wanted to wing it. And I said, "Oh, please, let's not wing it. No, we're going to wing it. We're going to wing it." And I trust me, don't do it. Don't do it, because there is a certain order. If you plan your pitch out, there's a certain order of how you want to present the information. In other words, you want to hold their hand, bring them into your universe, and then start topping yourself and holding their interest. And if you see you've lost them at the beginning, tragic.
Yeah, that would be. I find pitching very unnerving. I think a lot of people do. It's always uncomfortable for me because you feel like you're in the spotlight in a weird way, and you want to please them, you want to sell, but it's very challenging. So I thank you for saying what you just said about preparation and especially about not winging it, as some people try to do. Well, I've been having just a fun, fabulous conversation for almost an hour now with Tom Ruegger, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit. And you've already told us this huge number of just fantastic stories. I didn't know we were going to get so many great stories, but do you have any other stories that are either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny from all your experiences?
Well, if you'll permit me, and this will probably go on too long, but how I got my first job in Hollywood, I drove out from New Jersey, and this is many years ago, and I pulled into a shabby, cheap, because I didn't have hardly any money, motel on Sunset Boulevard, and I checked into room number 6, and there was a phone booth out front, and from that phone booth I could see the Chuck Jones offices in a tower down the street. And in another direction, I could see the Bakshi Tower where he was working. I mean, the addresses. So I got into that booth and I made some phone calls, and I called to see if I could drop my portfolio off. Anyway, so this phone booth was controlled, if you'll allow the word, by women of the night. And it wasn't night; it was day, but it was controlled by a group of young women who used this phone to get jobs. The phone would come in. Oh, you go over, get on this address, and they would go scurrying off. So there are several women that hovered around this phone booth and didn't want me clogging it up with my little phone calls to different studios. So I called Hanna-Barbera, and they said, "Who from this booth?" And they said, "Who would you like to speak to?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't know anybody." Bill Hanna, because I didn't know. And they connected me to Bill Hanna's office, and his secretary was very nice, but she said, "Well, okay, I'll take your name. I don't know if he's going to call you back, but I'll take your name and give me your number." And back then, this is a long time ago, the phone number was actually on the booth. You could call it. So I gave him the number, and the girls that are there are like, "Oh gosh, get away." And I said, "Okay, but listen, if a phone call comes in for me, would you go get me at my room?" "What?" "Yeah, Tom Ruegger. I might get a call." So I go to my room, and like an hour later, I get, "Yeah? Are you Ruegger?" "Yeah." "Well, come on, there's a phone call for you, but hurry up. We got some lines coming in. We got business to do." So I go running out to the booth, and it's, "Please hold for Mr. Hanna." And click, "Yeah, who is this, Ruegger?" Say, "Yeah, Mr. Hanna, I'm out from New Jersey. I'm an animator. We're really busy over here. Get over here right away." Click.
Wow.
"We're really busy. We're busy." So I drove. I got lost on the way. There were several Cahuenga boulevards. I get to Hanna-Barbera. I get into Bill Hanna's office. I have left my portfolio at Bakshi's. So all I have is my portfolio now on slides. I got it on slides. So Bill Hanna is up at the window looking at a slide. I said, "What the hell is that?" So, "Well, that's a dog." "That's not a dog where I come from." "All right, listen, Ruegger, I'll give you a 1-month trial period. Start Monday." So that was my first job at Hanna-Barbera.
Wow.
And I survived. I survived the trial.
And beyond. That's amazing. I don't think that would happen today. Do you?
No, I tell my kids, I have sons, they like to work on certain things. I tell them, just call the place up. And they say, are you out of your mind? But back then, I called the place up. How about that? And they were busy. Bill, it turned out Joe Barbera had sold like 20 different shows, so they were just out of their minds busy.
They needed people.
They needed bodies holding pencils.
Bodies holding pencils. Yeah. That's the way the industry worked. Well, one thing that I know from my time in the business is that the animation industry, unlike the rest of the industry, tended, I don't know if it still does or not, but tended to be more open and friendly and welcoming to young people trying to get in. That was your experience, obviously.
And I agree with you, and I think that's still true because it's a very specific, niche. We're all in one group. We all care about the same stuff. While a lot of the other areas of expertise in our business are, a lot of unions involved. It's tricky to even get on a set. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Whether you're a best boy or you're an electrician. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult, and animation tends to be a little friendlier and warmer and more inviting. All right, so last question for you today, Tom. You've given us a tremendous amount of advice throughout this whole show, but is there a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to those that come up to you and say, how do I get in? How do I do this? How do I work in the industry? What kind of advice do you give folks?
Well, I know I find myself dealing mainly with people that like animation and want to be involved in animation. And I encourage those people to, and I guess it would be true of other creative types, work on your own stories, work on your own characters, come up with something original rather than derivative, because derivative is, we've seen it. So the more original your stuff can be, I think you have a better chance. Then when I get a little deeper into it, I suggest, and I don't think it's that easy, when you're doing sort of cartoon comedy, I think we tend to go with cliches. We tend to use material that we maybe have seen before. And I say that if you're going to do that, you got to come up with a topper. You got to take it to the next level, which hasn't been taken before, because you don't want to just redo Chuck Jones' best stuff, but you want to at least top it or make it significantly different. So don't fall back on the cliches.
I think that's extremely sound advice. Be original, be unique, and hopefully that will carry the day. Tom Ruegger, this has been so much fun for me to talk to you today about all these wonderful stories you've had, and I'm sure we could go on for hours more. I'm sure you have many, many tales to tell from your time in the trenches in the animation industry. I can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, and especially for your wisdom. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure. Anytime. Really a treat.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.